I'm not here just to get social media clout. Like, I'm introduced single payer. I want credit for that. No, I don't want any of that. At the end of the day, if this gets through with someone else's name on it, I'm fine.
Okay, so actually our first guest is here a little early. I like that. I like that. I appreciate that. So let's welcome Ash Kalra to the stream. Ash, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm good, Justin. So good to meet you virtually, man. Big fan of yours. I've been a Chargers fan since before you were born, but I'm even more excited about how active you are and how you're educating the community.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. I was telling the stream, everyone in the chat, we've been talking on Twitter for a while, but I'm finally excited to actually get you on the show, be able to talk to you. I haven't got a chance to talk to you. I know you're doing a lot of stuff within the California legislature, to push progressive priorities, i.e. you recently just introduced CalCare. Remind me again what the actual bill is, like SB.
It's Assembly Bill, so it's AB 1400.
AB 1400. Okay, so AB 1400. If none of y'all know, that's the single payer healthcare bill that just got introduced by Ash and some of the other assembly members within the assembly here in California. So what was that? Well, because I believe it was written by the nurses. Is that correct?
Well, we work with them on it. So
work with them, right?
Yeah, and so my team has been working with them for months, really, over the past several weeks, and we introduced it towards the end of February. And it's a good bill. It's a good policy bill. There was a bill introduced 4 years ago, which was also a good bill that I was a co-author on. But this one I think is even better because it actually has cost containment in it. So it has cost controls. And so just basically what that means is that you can have single payer, but if you're not containing the cost, you're just throwing money down a bottomless pit. And so what we're trying to do is, while giving access and healthcare to everyone, we also want to have some methodology in there that actually controls the cost on pharmaceuticals, on treatments, and all that. And so it's a pretty comprehensive policy bill.
Okay. And as far as the bill 4 years ago, I think I remember that actually, some journalists covering that. And the big, like you were saying, the big, I guess, pushback against it was it wasn't funded fully. Was that it didn't have the funding written into the bill? So how did y'all, accommodate that ask?
We're still working on that part, and this is the thing about it, because everyone knows that our current system is the most expensive in the world, and that every legitimate study shows single payer will be less expensive. But it's not as simple as saying, let's just move money from bucket A to bucket B. Bucket B might be CalCare single payer, but there isn't a bucket A. Money comes in a convoluted way in so many different streams. And remember, that's been done by intention over decades to make it more complicated. The more complicated it is, the harder it is to change. And so legitimately and rightfully so, 4 years ago, there was a question like, well, you don't have anything on funding, but you want to pass this policy. And we have to be very careful about that, because Vermont, they passed the policy, they got waivers from the federal government, and then they abandoned it because they didn't have any funding. And so what I'm doing is I'm working with the nurses, with the speaker's office, on a separate bill vehicle, a separate bill that would deal with actually bridging the gap on funding, because right now, over half of our healthcare funding is already public. It's federal and state money. Over 200 to 220 billion of it, we're already paying for. The majority of the rest is employer funded. So how do you get that employer funded money? And that's what we're trying to figure out. It's a huge sum of money, even if it's less expensive than our current system. You've got to find what kind of taxation, what kind of mechanisms you have to put in place. So it's extremely complicated. We've been working on it internally, and we're hoping to continue to move it forward simultaneously and on a parallel track with the policy bill.
Okay. So where is where's CalCare at right now within the process?
So where it is in the process right now, we've introduced it. We're trying to work to get it referred to the first committee, which is the health committee. Now, our understanding is, and I think it's legitimate to ask, is like, well, before we refer it to health committee, where are you on the funding side of it? And so we're trying to work on that to a place of comfort where everyone's comfortable. Okay, we actually have some progress going forward on the funding, so that we can have the policy bill heard. And so this is all going to be determined really in the next days, week or two. We've got to have a path forward. So I will know in the next week or so if it's going to get referred to Health Committee, and if it does, then you'll certainly hear more about it, because we're going to have a public hearing on CalCare in the Health Committee, and that's my hope.
Okay, awesome. Wow, so that could be coming up pretty soon here. What's the biggest barrier to this getting passed? Now we obviously know California is a super majority Democratic state, completely controlled by Democrats, right? And nationally, we know that single payer, is supported by 9 out of 10 Democrats, poll after poll, and it's actually now supported by a majority of Republicans as well in a lot of polls. So, and I believe there's been polling done in California as well that shows majority of people want single payer healthcare. So, where's the gap between the legislators and the people and what the people want?
And I'll add one more to that, is like even doctors now, a majority favor single payer. The younger generation of doctors are far in favor of single payer. But that being said, and so this is the issue that comes up sometimes, is that we know, like when I say that our current system is more expensive, in the order of tens of billions of dollars more than what single payer will cost, well, where do you think that money is going? It's going to profit. It's going to profit of industries that have a huge amount of influence, because we still have an enormous amount of money in our political system. I'm one of only 2 legislators that don't take corporate PAC money in legislature. So that money has an influence, and what we have to do is we have to recognize it's not enough to say polling supports it. It's not enough to be part of the movement, whether you were for Bernie Sanders, whether you're a Democratic Socialist. It's not good enough to say, well, we support it, so our legislators got to do what we say. It's a movement, and movement building requires us to not only say this is what we're for, but legislators in Sacramento, not only do we want you to vote for it, but if you do, we've got your back, right? Because you have to remember that when folks vote against those moneyed interests, it's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm going to do, I think this policy is good and it's right, I'm going to vote for it. It's that next election cycle, they're going to have tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions spent against them. And so if they don't believe there's a policy that legitimately has a path of going forward, it's a safer bet for them to lay off of it and say, wait a second, if this isn't going to be moving forward, I'm going to hold off for a second. And oh, by the way, movement that says you're in favor of this, where are you when I do vote for it and they're coming after me? And so that's kind of like the larger piece where we have to not only hold to account those that aren't there, but we have to help get the Democrats that may be a little, because some of the seats that we have, although we have a supermajority, they're purple seats, and they know that if they anger these industries that have a huge amount of interest too much, they're going to put their seats in jeopardy, and we'd much rather have that Democrat there than some Republican that's going to swoop in. And so that's where it's like we have to be strategic, both in terms of the policy, but also the politics, and saying, hey, we're for single payer, and if you're going to help us get there, we're going to have your back the next election cycle. Sometimes that second step doesn't happen, where, look, just last year, Uber, Lyft, all these wealthy corporations got Prop 22 passed.
Yep.
Overwhelming, because they spent almost $250 million. The drug companies, we had a bill to put controls on pharmaceutical costs in California. We couldn't get it passed because the drug companies spent over $100 million. So that's what I got to say as a progressive to the progressive movement. We got to show up. It's not just a matter of us making noise or being on social media or criticizing our legislators at a rally. We got to show up at the polls. We got to make it clear that we're going to stand up for our values in every aspect of the political system,
Yeah, no, I feel that. And I think a good example of that happened in Seattle with the, Assemblywoman Kashama Sawant, who went up against Amazon, the biggest corporation probably in the world. And because of that movement that she had behind her, because she showed up at rallies, because she was, on the front lines, and that was, they're trying to recall her because of all the work that she's actually done to actually get that minimum wage implemented, to actually get a tax on Amazon to pay for some of this stuff. She was actually able to get that, passed. So like, what do you feel about that type of politics? Like, of course, you're in the assembly, but that does not mean you like, there's examples like Ashama, there, Ralph Nader. There's a bunch of examples in the past when AOC showed up at Nancy Pelosi's office. Like, how do you feel about you also being a part of that? Because when people see you on the front lines as well, willing to say, okay, I'm out here fighting with y'all, I think that gives people a lot of hope as well. So how do you feel about those type of politics?
Look, I think we got to be on the ground too. Look, I mean, I was there with McDonald's workers that went on strike at 5 a.m. when they came back from a 4-day strike. I was there at the rallies rallying in front of Uber's headquarters, rallying against Prop 22. I show up everywhere I can where I think that my presence will make a difference, because that's where I come from. I was a public defender for 11 years. I never planned on being an elected official. I used to be in the rallies. I was there when they were like shooting out the pepper spray when we were in 2004. I was in DC. We were protesting Bush's inauguration, and I was out in the streets last year with my community. I was with the Black Lives Matter movement. When I was in City Hall in San Jose, I was the only council member to show up with Occupy San Jose when the Occupy movement was happening. So I do believe you have to have both. You've got to. If I'm not there with the people, I feel a disconnect. At the same time, I've got to be in this building that I'm in right now and know how to get my colleagues to vote for the things that I'm trying to push, whether it's the Racial Justice Act, whether it's SinglePayer, you name it. I'm pushing a lot of this really. When I come to my colleagues to talk about a bill, they know, okay, here comes the Kalra bill again, because they know I'm not here just to do easy things. I'm here to do big things because my time is limited here. I see my political mortality. I don't know how many years I'm in this position, so I'm going to push. So I absolutely believe that elected officials do need to be with the people, and the people have to understand the challenges we face when we step into this building. And it's a really lonely feeling at times. When you're a progressive and you're trying to push things, it can be really lonely, and we get it. That it's hard for us to push things here, and then we get attacked by some of our allies on the left when we're not doing as much as they think we should be able to do. But you know what? I signed up for it. I'm here, and I'm in for the fight.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I understand. Look, I'm in a field as well, playing sports where it can feel lonely, particularly because of the amount of money that's in that. And what usually goes in accordance with that is conservative politics, right? You want tax cuts, this and that. So I feel you on that, and I think like you said, I think it is important to let's not put ourselves first. Let's put the people that are actually struggling first, right? And so that's why I really appreciate what you're saying. What do you think? Let's say best case scenario, right? It gets through the committees. It gets to the speaker. So first off, what is the speaker's role in all of this? Speaker Rendon, I believe his name is, because, there's been a lot of people on the left, progressives, have been very frustrated with Speaker Rendon in the past. Obviously in 2017, like you were saying, he mentioned a lot of stuff about how the bill was incomplete. Other people could argue, well, you're the speaker, why don't you help complete it? But what is his role in this, and how close or how much of a push is it going to need to get it past his desk for it to get actually a vote on the floor?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I'll say, look, it's not one person. Even the person in the position of the speaker, this is not about one person holding a bill or not holding a bill. Look, a few years ago, he asked, hey, tell me how, let's work on the financing, and there was no response back from the bill author. It's not up to the speaker to get bills through. It's up to the authors of the bill. It is up to me to try to get through the best I can, try to convince my colleagues, the movement outside, try to convince the speaker, we've been working in his office. It's at the end of the day, it's not about whether, look, 4 years ago, when there was no real response from the bill author on how you're going to pay for it, while right now we're having these conversations, when the speaker holds that bill, he's taking the arrows for the entire Democratic caucus. And so unless we get enough colleagues that are going to support it, it doesn't matter whether the speaker supports it or not. We get a lot of bills that die that the speaker supports and goes forward, and they don't get enough bills. They don't get enough votes on the floor of the assembly, or they don't get enough votes on the committee during committee. So it's not just about the speaker, who's a friend of mine, who actually, we've gotten a lot of progressive things done that never would have been done under other speakers, because he himself holds progressive values, but he also has a caucus to run. He's not going to, if I, Osh Kalra, can't get the votes for a bill, that's on me. And it's on the movement and it's on the sponsors. Like, we've got to get that momentum building. And so I've taken up the responsibility to try my best. And that's why not only on 1400, but on the funding piece, I'm putting my time and energy to try to resolve those issues too, because I don't want to be Vermont where they pass single payer and then abandon it because they couldn't figure out how to pay for it. It's I'm not here just to get social media clout. Like, I'm introduced single payer. I want credit for that. No, I don't want any of that. At the end of the day, if this gets through with someone else's name on it, I'm fine. But we've got to take a serious effort at it. And there are a lot of pieces in there, including working with the speaker's office.
And okay, so back to my original question, say best case scenario, it passes, gets a vote on the floor, it passes, then it goes to the governor's desk, right? And he's signaled that he supports single payer. How much of a chance do you think it actually has a passing if it makes it to that level?
Well, first look, it's a long haul just to get it through the assembly, but then again, it has to go to the Senate. So there's a whole nother. So that's just under your hypothetical. It gets to the governor's desk, then we have to hold him to what he campaigned on. Look, I a big reason why I endorsed Governor Newsom is because he campaigned in support of single payer. The big reason why I was a delegate, a Bernie Sanders delegate to the Democratic Convention. I was a Pleo delegate. I voted against the Democratic platform because it didn't have single payer. It also didn't have decriminalizing marijuana and a couple other things, but single payer was a huge part of it. And so as Democrats in California, single payer is on the platform. Our governor campaigned for it. So if it gets to his desk, I think that, the amount of work it's going to take to get it to his desk, at that point, it has been, trust me, fully vetted if it gets to a point where it's to his desk. And I would expect him to sign it. But there's a long way to go there, and I'm going to engage the governor's office. I've already had touch base with them somewhat on it. He does have his own Healthcare for All commission that is going to continue its work this year. We're going to engage with that to whatever extent we can to make sure that any questions we need answered. So look, at the end of the day, I think that we are in a position with the Biden administration having Javier Becerra, our former Attorney General here, now as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's publicly been in support of single payer. That helps us in terms of a pathway forward on getting federal waivers. If we don't get federal waivers to be able to use federal money, we're done. So there's like four or five, six different things that have to happen that we have to move simultaneously. And so right now, the policy and the funding piece, we have to do things on what are constitutional amendments regarding GAN limit and Prop 90. It's a whole bunch of things we have to do. And so to get it to the governor's desk and to get the federal government to fund it, and eventually to have to go to the voters. And that's where the movement's going to better have to show up and put their vote where their mouth is and show up, because we're going to be facing hundreds of millions of dollars of money against us. But, that's what the movement's about, to try to get it there over the course of the years ahead.
How frustrating is it for you when you know that, every other developed country in the world has this policy, yet we're in 2021 after a pandemic, and it's still facing all this opposition in the most progressive state in the union? How do you, is there some merit to you, actually holding up some of your colleagues and saying, well, I see that, all the studies have been done. It's going to cost less. It actually, even if it costs a little bit more, we're covering everyone, right? And you're not supporting this. And, you also potentially have taken some money from some of these industries, and that could be a little telling. Now, it feels to me that on the national level and on a state level, that adversarial type of politics is not the game plan and strategy that progressives are taking. What's your view on that? And if those roadblocks come up in this fight, what's your strategy and plan on getting over those hurdles?
Yeah, no, that's a very fair question. To how much do you push, pull, but I think that if we don't have enough support to be able to do the aggressive push it forward. It's like, and I know that people see oh, what about Joe Manchin? Well, Joe Manchin is one person, because we only have 50 people in the U.S. Senate. That one person can do it. If we had 55 Democrats, would that one Joe Manchin make as much of a difference? Well, no, he wouldn't. Now, the reality is we don't have, just like we don't have 50 progressive senators or 250 progressive Congress members, we don't have 41, or in the case of having to do what's called a constitutional amendment, ACA, 54 out of the 80 that are willing to do that. So if I had the leverage to say, you know what, I'm going to push this as Kalra because, it's the right thing to do and I'm going to call everybody out. If I thought that strategy would be successful in getting it done, then yeah, I would consider that strategy. But I don't think it is right now, given the makeup of our legislature today. But I also do believe that there are enough people that believe in single payer that if we can figure out a path forward on the financing and some of the more complex issues, I think that we can get a majority of my colleagues there. I truly believe it, but it's going to take a lot of work to do it. I think we're more likely right now where we sit today to do it that way than that more aggressive approach. But I could be if I try it my way and it doesn't work, but a part of it is that, look, 2024, we're going to have the biggest turnover in the state assembly that we've had in 12 years. It's up to the movement to get people in there that are going to be on board, because we have some districts where we have very conservative members that are in pretty blue districts. And so in 2024, that's an opportunity to have a shift. I'm not saying that, look, I'm not saying it because we should wait for single payer 2024. That's why I'm bringing it now, because I can't wait to 2024. I'm just saying if we want to see a shift in the legislature in that manner where we can be more aggressive, we have to get more people elected that are willing, that are already on board day one.
Speaking to that point, obviously on a national level, like you were saying, 50-50 split in the Senate. What is the percentage of truly progressive members, say people that actually do support a bill like CalCare in the California State Assembly and the California Senate? Like what are the numbers like we're looking at?
It's hard to say. I think it depends to some degree on the issue. Like there are some folks that are progressive on everything, but maybe on criminal justice they're not, or maybe on the environment they're not, or maybe on healthcare, like they're, So it's hard to say. I think we have a lot of people. I'd say we have a lot of people that are progressive on a number of things. To say those, like, we have there's 20 of us. Well, I guess 19 now because Rob Bonta got appointed Attorney General, but there's 19 that are on this bill. Now that's out of 120 in the legislature and about 80 or so Democrats, but that's a good barometer that at least a quarter willing to put their names on this bill. There are more that will vote for it, even though they're not a co-author. So I would say we got a good base of about a couple dozen progressives in the assembly, which is actually a pretty strong base considering 41's a majority. And I'm not saying the delta between the 20, 25, and 41 that the other 15, 16 won't vote for single payer, or won't vote for another progressive bill. They do. That's how we get progressive bills done. I got the Racial Justice Act passed with 49 votes. That's a really healthy number. 49 out of the 61 Democrats to vote. We even got some pretty moderate Democrats to vote for it. And so again, I think it can be issue specific, more so than broad. I mean, there's a few of us that are definitely pretty much every time you can count. Like, I don't take cop money, I don't take corporate money. There's a good number of us that you can pretty much count on pretty much every progressive issue are going to be there. But there is, I think we can get a majority there most of the time on most progressive issues. It just depends. But sometimes what it requires is the watering down of some of the bills, and that gets really frustrating where you can't get as much as you wanted through,
Right. Okay. So what do you feel? I mean, on a national level, I like to start national and work, more to the state, because I think there are a lot of similarities between the two. On the national level, a lot of people are calling for progressives, because we have worked hard to get progressives elected. Obviously, you're never, not in 100 years going to have a situation where you have true progressives having a majority within this Democratic Party, which is completely, bought and sold for. I mean, the people at the top take the most money from corporations and then, go and legislate against the people and for the corporations. So, I mean, if we're talking about actually getting to a point where we have a true majority of real progressives, I mean, that's good. That's a 20, 30, 40-year task. So we're talking about right now, as we're in this crisis, there were a lot of people saying, well, if you have the Joe Manchin types, of course, you're always going to have those roadblocks. You guys have power in a coalition if you stand together and say, we're not actually we're gonna start tanking some of this stuff until you guys start coming around to where the rest of the country is, and to policies that we need in this country right now, because people are in LA are underneath bridges. People don't have access to healthcare, right? So I think there's a lot of frustrated people that are tired of saying, okay, well, in 3, 4, 10, 15 years, we can get this done. Y'all just need to keep voting. So is there a feeling of understanding of that sentiment, within the California state legislature, that we got to start getting some of this stuff done and passed right now? We got to start looking towards more aggressive approaches and maybe holding up some bills and threatening people's power, threatening people's position to actually get these things passed. Otherwise, we're just going to be asking nicely for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Is there that sentiment there?
That's a great point. I mean, the reality is, on a lot of these issues, we've been asking nicely for 40 or 50 years or longer, right?
Right.
It again depends on the issue, but I think that one of the things that we've seen some movement on things that we would not have seen, just a handful of years ago, especially criminal justice reform. Not that we've gotten everything we've wanted, but we've seen a lot. I mean, we have 2 prisons that are closing. We've seen a shift in a relatively short period of time that we've never seen in our state, to go from the incarceration capital to now be closing prisons, to now getting rid of a lot of these mandatory minimum kind of sentencing enhancements, Racial Justice Act. We're doing a lot of things in that arena. So I think, again, if you go issue by issue, we are seeing some things. I don't think we've done enough on the environment. I think, of course, we're trying to push on single payer, on workers' rights. We've had mixed results. I think that, going back to my earlier point, I think because we do have a lot of folks in the legislature that are very progressive, but typically on certain issues, there might be some issues they're not. We don't get the kind of that tipping point that allows us to do exactly what you're saying, where it's like, okay, well, on this one issue, we have a tipping point enough to do that kind of strategy. To the other point is that we've gotten a lot of things done very successfully by trying to coalition build. Like I said, I've been able to get some more moderate voters on board on our side, because we haven't gone that aggressive. We got rid of predatory lending, the triple-digit lending. We did that. We hadn't been able to do that in decades. We got that done a couple of years ago by getting moderates on board that weren't on board 3 or 4 years earlier. So it's a little bit different than the federal government, because we are able to do some things that are just not, that wouldn't have been possible a handful of years ago. But that's because the electorate is changing, right? Because the electorate is changing, we're able to achieve that. We have a bill right now to stop our cooperation with ICE. I have a resolution to call on the federal government to actually abolish ICE. And that is moving its way through the legislature. Would that have moved through 5 years ago? I don't think it would have, but I think part of that is the electorate is demanding it. And so I definitely think there's more room for us to move more quickly. And that's where, we'll have to see what kind of strategies and tactics work most effectively to get us there. But, I think that's always the argument: incrementalism versus we push and fight to get what we want and get nothing. And, look, Dr. King faced that. You read a letter from Birmingham jail, that's exactly what it was about. It was the other pastors and what have you were talking the strategy of incrementalism. And he was saying, how long do we have to wait? You tell me to keep waiting and tell me to wait. And that's always what we have to go back to, is which one. But Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement, that took a decade to get done, right? But it also wouldn't have gotten done without forcing the issue in the streets. And so that's the constant struggle. It's what I always struggle with, is how much of it is that push and how much of it is kind of the getting people there on the policy. And I think you have to have a combination of both. You have to make people uncomfortable to get them, even while you're trying to get them there. And so I think a lot of my legislation does make folks uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that I can't get them there. And but I've had a lot of frustrations too in having bills die, and it's been tough as well in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate the conversation. I think this, like you said, this has a long way to go, but I'll definitely be there. I know my people at Healthcare for LA, they'll be there. And I think, like you said, I think we need to start having actions in the streets, whether that's at City Hall, whether that's at politicians' houses. If you don't think it's nice, if you think it's a little too mean, well, I think it's really, violent that people are dying because they don't have access to healthcare, particularly in California, which, is the most progressive state, or supposedly. And, that's something that we definitely need in this country. We need in the state. So I know that I'll be there. I'll be pushing for those things. I'm hoping to see you there. Like you said, you've been out on the streets in some of these fights. And if it comes down to it, and you need to go nuclear to get this passed, personally, I think that's an option we need to take, because the gravity of the issue and the gravity of the moment is that big. It really is that big. So I appreciate the conversation. Can you let everyone know where to find you, how and what best ways they can, especially if they're here in California, to support CalCare along the way?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on social media. That's where we connected, on Twitter, Ash_Kalra, and also Instagram. You'll find me there. Similarly, I'm also on TikTok, Facebook, you name it, and you can always send me messages if you have questions. I think to find out more about CalCare, you can go to my website. If you just Google Ash Kalra, you'll find my official website there, and you can always send emails and inquire more about AB 1400. You can also go to the California Nurses Association, CNA, go to their social media handles, and they share a lot of information about CalCare, and they have some great policy folks as well that can help share more about that, as well as the other legislation that I'm working on. Definitely stay connected with me. I'm happy to try my best to keep people as informed as possible.
For sure. Thanks for the conversation. We'll have to have you back on once this bill starts to actually go through some of these committees. So appreciate the conversation.
Well, I appreciate it. And I know I'm also not only a big fan of yours, but I know you have Brianna coming up, big fan of hers as well. Say what's up for me.
I will. All right. Appreciate it. Take care. All right. That was our conversation with Assemblyman Ash Kalra. I appreciate his fight. I appreciate him introducing this bill. I think I've tried to plant the seed, within his brain to use some more of these aggressive tactics. I think sometimes when you get into those legislatures and you're around these people, you start to it almost humanizes them, right? But I mean, you can't. It's very dehumanizing for someone in 2021 in America, particularly in California, which is supposed to be a progressive state, to not support something like single payer. I don't care, what their excuse is for not supporting it. That excuse is old. That excuse is tired, and most likely that excuse is bullshit. It's most likely because they're taking money from the healthcare insurance industry, and that's why they're not, and that's why they don't want to support these bills. So we're definitely gonna have Ash back on, and we're gonna talk to him once it's more going through the committees and everything. And if there's certain assembly members who are not supporting it, who are being barricades to this huge monumental piece of legislation that needs to be passed, not in 2024 when we can get more people need to keep voting and get more people. No. That needs to be passed right now. That needs to be passed this year. Okay. And so, Washington has another, between Washington and New York, there's two other single payer bills within states. So, we'll keep you updated on all that.